95% of all new products completely fail. Billions of dollars vaporized, burned in a massive furnace of corporate ignorance. Why? Because the smartest, most highly compensated executives on Earth fundamentally misunderstand human desire. Desire. They operate under a dangerous, deeply entrenched delusion. They actually think people want their products. They do not. Nobody wants your product. Nobody has ever wanted your product. This is a devastating truth. It shatters the foundation of modern marketing. When you truly internalize this concept, you realize that most companies are blindly throwing darts in the dark. But there is a hidden framework, a psychological lens that completely decodes consumer behavior. It turns unpredictable human irrationality into a precise, highly predictable mathematical equation. We will reveal the exact mechanics of this secret framework and how it completely redefines your entire competitive landscape a little later in this breakdown. We are rigorously taught that to sell more, we just need to make the product objectively better. We aggressively add complex features. We constantly lower the price. We obsessively run expensive focus groups. We meticulously slice and dice human demographics. This is exactly what the biggest, most successful fast food empire on the planet did in the late 1990s. McDonald's. They had a very simple, seemingly straightforward corporate goal. They desperately wanted to sell more milkshakes. They followed the traditional business playbook to absolute perfection. They spent massive amounts of capital. And they failed spectacularly. So how did the brightest marketing minds in the world completely fail to sell a simple, sugary beverage, and what bizarre, counterintuitive realization ultimately reversed their fortunes overnight? That is the exact question we are answering today. To deeply understand the sheer brilliance of this framework, we have to aggressively examine the catastrophic failure of traditional marketing. Look closely at the standard corporate approach. It relies heavily on an illusion. The illusion of demographics. Marketers absolutely love putting human beings into neat, statistically predictable little boxes. They look at age. They look at income level. They look at marital status and zip codes. If you are a 35-year-old married man living in a specific suburban neighborhood, the massive corporate algorithm assumes you will act exactly like every other 35-year-old married man in that neighborhood. This is fundamentally flawed. It is mathematically bankrupt. Knowing a man's precise demographic profile tells you absolutely nothing about why he chooses to buy a newspaper instead of a cup of coffee on a Tuesday morning. Demographics do not cause human behavior. Demographics are completely passive. But McDonald's did not know this. They heavily relied on traditional methods to boost their flagging milkshake sales. They aggressively gathered their target demographic into highly controlled focus groups. They sat them down in sterile conference rooms. They politely asked them what they wanted. Do you want it sweeter? Do you want it thicker? Do you want us to add more chocolate syrup? The consumers gave clear, definitive answers. McDonald's executives were thrilled. They immediately went back to their massive test kitchens. They meticulously re-engineered the product exactly to the focus group's exact, stated specifications. They launched the brand new, highly optimized milkshake. Absolutely nothing happened. Sales stayed perfectly, terrifyingly flat. The J-curve dipped into a frustrating, highly expensive plateau. The massive corporate machine was completely paralyzed. They had successfully given the customer exactly what the customer explicitly asked for, and the customer still completely refused to buy it. The traditional marketing playbook was completely broken. They were entirely out of ideas. They desperately needed a completely new paradigm. Enter Clayton Christensen. He was a brilliant, highly revered professor at the Harvard Business School. He was the godfather of disruptive innovation. McDonald's brought Christensen and his elite team of researchers in to actively solve the unsolvable milkshake mystery. Christensen entirely ignored the expensive demographic data. He completely threw the focus group transcripts straight into the trash. He introduced a radically different, highly aggressive concept called the jobs-to-be-done theory. The core philosophy is brilliantly simple. Human beings do not actually purchase products. Human beings strictly hire products to do a specific job in their lives. To figure out the job, Christensen's team did something incredibly strange. They did not ask anyone any questions. They simply stood in a McDonald's restaurant for 18 hours a day. They meticulously watched. They fiercely observed human behavior in its raw, natural state. They aggressively tracked exactly what time the milkshakes were bought. They noted what else was purchased with them. They observed whether the customer was alone or with a group. They documented whether the customer ate in the restaurant or aggressively drove away. The data revealed a massive, hidden anomaly. Nearly half of all milkshakes were actively purchased before 8 o'clock in the morning. The buyers were almost always completely alone. They never bought anything else. They immediately got back into their cars and aggressively drove away. The executives were completely baffled. Who drinks a massive, heavy dessert at 7:30 in the morning? The next day, Christensen's team aggressively intercepted these morning buyers in the parking lot. They asked them a highly specific, very strange question. "Excuse me, but what exact job were you trying to do when you hired that milkshake this morning?" The commuters were confused. But as they talked, the profound truth finally revealed itself. These people all shared a common, incredibly painful human experience. They had a long, highly boring morning commute to work. They needed something to actively keep them engaged during the drive. Furthermore, they were not completely full from breakfast. They heavily needed something to successfully stave off their inevitable hunger until 10 o'clock. The milkshake was not a dessert. It was a highly specialized commuting tool. Think about the aggressive alternatives. Think about what the milkshake was actually competing against. What else could the commuter hire to do this exact same job? They could hire a banana. But a banana is consumed entirely too fast. The job is over in exactly 2 minutes. The boredom instantly returns. They could hire a donut. But a donut is incredibly messy. It leaves sticky residue on the steering wheel. It is an operational nightmare for a driver. They could hire a bagel with cream cheese. But a bagel is dry and tasteless. It requires 2 hands to safely maneuver. It is actively dangerous in heavy morning traffic. But the milkshake. The milkshake is an absolute masterpiece of commuting engineering. It is incredibly thick. It literally takes 20 highly engaging minutes to successfully suck the heavy liquid through a thin plastic straw. It fits absolutely perfectly into a standard vehicle cup holder. It safely requires only 1 hand. And it sits heavily in the stomach, successfully destroying hunger until noon. The milkshake did the job perfectly. The profound aha moment had arrived. The executives finally realized their fatal, foundational error. They thought they were aggressively competing against Burger King and Wendy's for the perfect dessert. They were not. They were entirely competing against bananas, donuts, and sheer human boredom. Once McDonald's clearly understood the actual job, the strategic path forward became completely obvious. They did not need to arbitrarily change the flavor. They did not need to run expensive, meaningless focus groups about chocolate ratios. They aggressively made the milkshake even thicker, so it would specifically last through an even longer commute. They physically moved the dispensing machine out from behind the counter and placed it right at the front of the store. They allowed commuters to quickly swipe a prepaid card, grab the tool they hired, and rapidly escape back to their vehicles to beat the morning traffic. Sales absolutely skyrocketed. The crisis was completely averted. This profound realization traces back to a legendary quote by Harvard marketing professor Theodore Levitt. He famously stated, "People don't want to buy a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole." This simple sentence entirely redefines the fundamental nature of modern commerce. If you are a massive drill manufacturer and you define your business as making the absolute best drills on Earth, you are actively vulnerable to massive disruption. If a competitor suddenly invents a highly advanced laser that cuts a perfect quarter-inch hole flawlessly, your superior drill company will violently go bankrupt overnight. Your customer has absolutely zero emotional loyalty to your drill. They are entirely loyal to the hole. This framework forces you to completely abandon your deep emotional attachment to your own product. It demands radical, uncomfortable empathy. You must deeply understand the functional, emotional, and highly social dimensions of the user's hidden struggle. Let us pivot to the incredibly high-stakes world of modern software and human capital. Think about massive enterprise corporations. Why do they aggressively spend millions of dollars buying complex human resources software? If you ask a traditional software vendor, they will tell you the company wants a beautifully designed database. They will brag about their seamless cloud integration. They will passionately pitch their complex organizational charts and payroll modules. But the executives are not buying a database. They do not care about cloud architecture. What is the actual job they are desperately hiring the software to do? They are deeply terrified of organizational collapse. They are actively bleeding their absolute best talent to ruthless competitors. They are drowning in highly toxic, invisible operational friction. The job they need done is to seamlessly align a chaotic human workforce, actively build high-trust internal cultures, and strictly prevent their massive corporate empire from violently imploding from the inside out. If your software simply stores employee data, it completely fails the job. This is exactly why the most ambitious modern organizations must entirely rethink their digital infrastructure. They urgently need a systemic solution that intimately understands the true psychological job of human capital management. That is exactly where PulseMina HCM enters the equation. PulseMina HCM is not just another passive, highly boring HR database. It is aggressively designed from the ground up to actually execute the profound job of building a unified, high-performing workforce. It seamlessly removes the painful digital friction that constantly causes top-tier employees to quietly quit. By strategically focusing on true employee engagement, transparent performance tracking, and radically simplified internal workflows, PulseMina HCM directly solves the hidden executive nightmare. It is the precise, highly guarded operational secret weapon for modern companies that desperately want to confidently scale their global operations without ever losing their critical human alignment. Ultimately, the jobs to be done theory definitively proves a highly fundamental, absolutely inescapable law of modern business strategy. You absolutely cannot invent consumer desire. You can only discover it. The ultimate corporate winner is rarely the company with the absolute best underlying technology. The winner is always the company that most intimately and accurately understands the hidden, unspoken struggle of the human being using it. When you finally stop trying to aggressively sell your brilliant drill and you start rigorously focusing on the perfect hole, you completely eliminate your competition. If you learned something incredibly new today, hit the like button and immediately subscribe for more elite strategy breakdowns. And let us precisely know in the comments below what massive company's hidden strategy should we completely unlock next.